Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Kiran Gupta from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss women right to succession and inheritance under Muslim, Christian, Parsi and Jews laws under the paper Women and Law in subject Women Studies. Friends, the objectives of today's discussion is to make readers aware about the right of Muslim, Christian, Jews and Parsi women to inherit the property from their relatives, and also to make readers aware about the right of relatives of the Muslim, Christian, Jew and Parsi women to inherit their property. Friends, the law of succession is an offshoot of the concept of private property. In societies adhering to the concept of private properties, the properties must be owned by someone. Property cannot remain ownerless even for a moment, and therefore, on the death of its owner, it must immediately vest in someone. In this module, we are going to discuss the law of succession, which answered the question as to who would be the owner of the property after the death of its owner. In the earlier modules, we have already discussed women's right to succession and inheritance in Hindu law. Here, we will discuss rights of the Muslim, Christian, Jew and Parsi women to succession and inheritance. The law grants freedom to an individual to bequest his or her property, though under Muslim law, only 1/3 of the property can be bequeathed by a male or a female to any person, a relation or a non-relation, or to an institution, charitable or non-charitable. An individual can make a will and thereby lay down a scheme of distribution of property taking effect after his or her death. This branch of law is called testamentary succession. If an individual dies without making a will or bequest of his or her property, expressing his or her desire to how the property is going to be devolved and in whom, the law of intestate succession will determine the persons and scheme of devolution of that property. This is called intestate succession. By intestate succession, only the relatives of the intestate are entitled to succeed to his or her property. The laws dealing with succession and inheritance in India are not uniform. A variety of different laws are in vogue and their application depend on multiple factors like the religion or the tribe of the parties, domicile of the parties, community to which they belong, sect in the community to which they belong, the marital status of the parties, religion of the spouse, and also the type of marriage the parties might have undergone. Before the advent of British rule, the major laws of inheritance in India had either their roots in religion or were deeply influenced by the personal laws which owed their allegiance to the religion and custom. The multiplicity of succession laws in India, diverse in their nature owing to their varied origin, made the property laws even more complex. But one thing was common in all these laws, and that is all these property laws has been exclusively for the benefit of men, and women had been treated as subservient and dependent on male support. Laws of inheritance under Muslim law are derived from the customs and usages prevalent among the tribes of Arabia before the revelation of Quran, as supplemented and modified further by the Quranic principles and the hadiths of the Prophet. Contrary to popular belief, Quranic revelations were not the starting point of Muslim law. It was in existence even prior to that, but it was systematized, concretized, and modified by the revelations and the traditions of the Prophet. The Indian Muslims are governed by the uncodified Muslim law of inheritance even today. The Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act of 1937 expressly directs courts in India to apply the Muslim law of inheritance to all Muslims. This statute had the effect of abrogating all customs relating to personal law of inheritance which were at variance with the Quranic law. This was required since most of the converts to Islam in India continue to follow their customary law of inheritance even after conversion. However, the Muslim law of inheritance and succession does not apply to the property of a Muslim if he gets married to a Muslim or a non-Muslim under the Special Marriage Act 1954. In such cases, succession to the property of the parties to the marriage and also to the issues of such marriage would be governed by the general provisions of inheritance available under the Indian Succession Act 1925 and not in accordance with the provisions of the Muslim law. Under the customary laws of Arabia, male agnates were given paramount importance, and the nearest male agnate succeeds to the entire estate. With respect to other agnates, descendants were preferred to ascendants, which in turn were preferred to collaterals. Females and cognates were excluded from inheritance. With the revelation of the Holy Quran, the basic principle of comradeship in arms was substituted for blood ties. Prophet says there was no bond stronger than the blood tie, and it became the guiding principle, and succession rights were extended to all the blood relations of the intestate, irrespective of their sex or the sex of the line of the relatives through whom they were related to the deceased. Consequently, blood relatives, primarily female and cognates, who were earlier excluded, were called Quranic sharers. Friends, laws relating to Shias and Sunnis with respect to inheritance are different. The difference arises as to the interpretation and implication of Quranic provisions and their incorporation in already existing system. The Quranic revelations did not abrogate the then existing customs and usages which provided the basic framework for laws of inheritance. Quran provided that their modification by adding to and amending the then existing rules. The Sunnis kept the old framework intact, such as preference to agnates over cognates, and superimposed the Quranic principles on this old setup. The Shias, on the other hand, blended the old rules with the newly laid down rules. They revised the law prevalent under the Arabia customs and usage in the light of the newly laid down principles and came out with a scheme widely different from the one propounded by the Sunnis. In Muslim law, there is no concept of joint family or joint family property. Muslim does not recognize the concept of joint family as a separate entity or the distinction between the separate or the joint family property, irrespective of whether the property was inherited from the father or any other paternal ancestor. The son does not have right by birth in the father's property. Exclusive ownership with full power of alienation is an essential feature of property ownership under Muslim law. Muslim law provides a single scheme of succession irrespective of the sex of the intestate. A woman acquires an absolute right in the property that she inherits, whether as a daughter, sister, or mother, with full power of alienation. She is permitted to keep her identity and individuality even after her marriage, and her relations are defined and ascertained in terms of her own self and not with respect to her husband or parents, unlike under Hindu law. The woman's blood relatives are her heirs, and the heirs of her husband are not given any preference over her own blood relatives. A Muslim is not permitted to bequeath more than one third of his estate without the consent of his heirs. So, generally, even if he makes a will, two-thirds of the property would go by intestate succession. Where he does not make a will, the entire property would go by intestate succession. In Sunni law, the heirs are divided into three groups. Firstly, the sharers, secondly, the residuaries, and thirdly, distant kindred. These groups comprise only of blood relatives with the exception of surviving spouse of the intestate. The property in the first instance is to be distributed among those sharers who were entitled to get the property. Sharers are the heirs who were earlier excluded but were introduced as heirs by the Quranic revelations. Their shares are fixed. Once the property is distributed among the sharers and anything is left, this surplus, called the residue, goes to the next category called residuaries. When there is no sharer or residuary present, the property passes to the third category, which comprises of cognates. So long as any heir in the former two category is present, the property does not pass to the third category of distant kindred. However, if the only relative in sharer category is surviving spouse and there is no residuary, then distant kindred will inherit along with the surviving spouse. A daughter inherits as a sharer only in absence of a son. An only daughter takes one half share in the property, and if there are two or more daughters, they would together take two-thirds of the property. In the presence of the son, she does not inherit as a sharer but becomes a residuary along with him and takes a share equal to half of his share. Father is a primary heir and has a fixed one-sixth share as a sharer, but he inherits along with the child or the child of the son. In the absence of child or child of the son, he inherits as a residuary and take to the extent of total property in absence of any other sharer. As far as mother's share is concerned, it is fixed one-sixth in presence of a child or child of a son, or when there are two or more brothers and sisters, or even one brother and one sister, irrespective of whether they were related to the deceased by full blood, consanguinity, or uterine relationship, and her share is enhanced to one-third in the absence of a child or child of a son, or where only one brother or sister may or may not be present. Shias divide the entire group of heirs into sharers and residuaries. There is no corresponding category of distant kindred under Shia law. There are 9 sharers, 3 of them are males and the 6 are females and include the parents, surviving spouse, that is husband or wife as the case may be, daughter, full and consanguine sister and uterine brothers and sisters. On the death of a Shia female, her husband has a fixed one-fourth share in presence of the lineal descendant and half in their absence. And here the lineal descendant include not just the children, but the children of the children and even their children also. Under Sunni law, the variation depends upon the presence or absence of children or any child of a son. But under Shia law, a child or lineal descendant, including that of the daughter, would affect the share of the surviving spouse. Where the deceased is a male, the widow takes 1/8 as a sharer in presence of lineal descendants and 1/4 in their absence. Both the father and the mother inherits along with the spouse and descendants. Father inherits as sharer, taking fixed one-sixth share in presence of lineal descendants and in their absence inherits as a residuary. Mother's share is one-sixth in presence of lineal descendants. Under Shia law, a daughter in the absence of a son inherits as a sharer. If there is only one daughter or only one descendant of such daughter, she will take half of the property, and if there are more than two daughters or their descendants, they take two-thirds of the property. With the son, a daughter inherits as a residuary and takes a share that is equal to half of his share. The son always inherits as residuary. Though women are awarded a share, their entitlement is half that of the male heir in the same category. For example, the daughter's share is half that of son's share. Since the right of inheritance was introduced at the time when women were not independent and were not capable of looking after their own financial needs, this prescription is on the basis of equity rather than equality. A Muslim man, therefore, cannot deprive his wife or daughter of their rightful share, either by forming a Hindu undivided family or through a will which will deprive women of their share in property. This is viewed as a positive feature unique to Muslim law. There is no different scheme of succession for male and female Muslims dying intestate. Since Muslim law of inheritance is quite complicated, there is a need for codification of succession law of Muslims applicable to all the sects. In the matter of succession, Jews were governed by their customary law. They had no codified law in India. Prior to the enactment of the Indian Succession Act 1865, even the Christians were governed by different laws. The Christians living in the Mufassil area were governed by the customary law, while in the provincial areas they were governed by the British common law. On the enactment of the 1865 Act, both Jews and the Christians were made to be governed by this codified law. The Indian Succession Act of 1865 was replaced by the Indian Succession Act of 1925. The Act applies to all communities except Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, and Muslims. As we know, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and Jains are governed by the Hindu Succession Act, and the Muslims are governed by their uncodified personal law. However, for Parsis, a separate scheme of succession is given under the 1925 Act. Persons who marry or whose marriage is registered under the provisions of the Special Marriage Act 1954 are governed by the provisions of the 1925 Act in succession matters unless both of them are Hindus. Under this Act, widow or widower has equal right to inherit, which is one-third of the intestate if the intestate has left any lineal descendant. In the absence of a lineal descendant but presence of kindred of intestate, the share of the widow or widower is half, and the other half goes to those who are kindred to the intestate. Actually, kindred are the blood relatives of the intestate. They are the distant blood relatives. In the absence of kindred also, widow or widower inherits whole of the property. Mother is not entitled to inherit along with the father of the intestate. Mother can inherit along with brothers and sisters. This provision seems to be highly discriminatory against the mother. This was a progressive piece of legislation, but it had deprived the mother to inherit from the son or daughter in the presence of father. It grants equal right to daughters and sons in parental property. In the absence of sons and daughters, their descendants are entitled to inherit. The spouse of the descendants, that is, sons and daughters' spouse, that is, daughter-in-law or son-in-law, are not an heir. The concept of ancestral property or co-parcelry is also not recognized, therefore providing greater safeguard for women as compared with Hindu law as well as Muslim and Parsi law until it was amended in 1991. Many communities continue to follow the pre-conversion laws regarding succession even after conversion. Most Christian communities followed the rule of co-parcenary or joint Hindu family property and continue to practice the discriminatory laws which prohibited daughters from inheriting the property. A leading case in this regard, Abraham versus Abraham, decided by the Privy Council in 1863, was concerned with the issue of succession to the property of a Roman Catholic who had subsequently converted to Protestant sect. The dispute was between the widow and her husband's brother. The brother pleaded that although they had converted to Christianity, they continued to follow the Hindu law of co-parcenary. The Privy Council laid down a rule regarding conversion and held such a property as joint family property. The matter again came up before the court subsequent to the coming of the Indian Succession Act 1865 in Tallis versus Saldanha, which held that after the enactment of the Indian Succession Act of 1865, the Christian converts are governed by its provision. Again, this view was overruled by the decision of Bombay High Court in Francis Ghosal versus Gabri Ghosal in 1907, which held that Christians are governed by the Hindu law of co-parcenary. The law of Cochin and Travancore was particularly discriminatory against the daughters. Under the Travancore Christian Succession Act 1910, the right of daughters was limited to one-fourth of the share of the son, or 5,000 rupees, whichever was less. Similarly, under the Cochin Christian Succession Act of 1922, the share of the daughter was one-third of the son, or rupees 5,000, whichever was less. Property in excess of this would be inherited by sons, and if there were no sons, then the nearest male relatives. In 1957, the Cochin and Travancore High Court affirmed that the Christians in the region are not governed by the Indian Succession Act, and the discriminatory statute enacted by the princely states applied to them. In 1974, a single judge of the Madras High Court in Solomon versus Muthaiya adopted a progressive stand and ruled that the Travancore Succession Act stood repealed after the independence, and Christians in the region are not governed by discriminatory statute but by the Indian Succession Act 1925. However, this decision was later overruled by the Madras High Court in D. Chelayya Nadar versus Lalita Bai in 1978, which affirmed that Christians in Tamil Nadu are governed neither by the progressive provisions of Indian Succession Act nor by the Hindu Succession Act, but by the uncodified Hindu customary law, and under this law, the son was the sole heir to the father's property to the exclusion of the daughter. Controversy was finally resolved and rested in a ruling given by the Supreme Court in Mary Roy versus State of Kerala in 1986. Here, the court struck down the discriminatory provision on a technical ground that, after independence, the laws enacted by the erstwhile princely states, which were not expressly saved, have been repealed. The court declared unconstitutional those provisions of the Travancore Syrian Christian Act 1916 and the Cochin Succession Act 1921, which limited the rights of Syrian Christian women to her parental property. In John Valamatam versus Union of India, the Supreme Court in 2003 declared unconstitutional the provision of Section 118 of the Indian Succession Act 1925, which required that no Indian Christian who had living relatives could leave his property for religious and charitable purposes unless provided for or by a will a year before his death. What happened in this case was a person executed a will, and within he executed a will in favor of religious and charitable purposes. Within 1 year of execution of the will, he died. After his death, the legatee claimed the property while his own heirs pleaded that Section 118 of the Indian Succession Act prohibits execution of a will within 1 year of the death of the, you can say prior to 1 year before the death of the intestate. And unfortunately, this Section 118 is not applicable to any other religious community except the Christians. So, the Supreme Court in this case decided that only a Christian is prohibited to execute a will before 1 year before his death, while other persons belonging to other religions have no such prohibition. So, they declared the provision to be unconstitutional. The court also decided that there is a need to make a uniform civil code. They actually directed the government to enact a uniform civil codes relating to succession matters also, so that such kind of dispute will not arise later. As far as Christian law is concerned, father can inherit with the lineal descendant or the widow, but the mother cannot. There is a need to make mother a co-heir with the father with a share equal to that of the father. The Parsis immigrants came to India to escape religious persecution by the Arab conquerors of Persia. They adopted the customs of the place where they had first taken shelter. A panchayat, that is an assembly of elders, administered decisions in civil and criminal matters, while personal matters were governed by decisions of the priests. Due to existence of a parallel system of administration in the Mufassil and the presidency areas, Parsis in the Mufassil areas were governed by their customary laws, while those in the later areas were governed by the English law. In a complete contrast to the law of Mufassil Parsis, under which women were excluded from inheritance initially and had only a right of maintenance. Under the English law, the widow of an intestate had an absolute share to the extent of one-third of his property, and the daughter was treated at par with the son. This diverse situation was brought to an end by the Parsi Interstate Succession Act 1865 that framed a uniform scheme for all Indian Parsis and increased the share of a widow and a daughter to a specific absolute ownership rather than a bare claim of maintenance, which was further amended in 1925, in 1937, and then post independence in 1991, effecting major changes in the inheritance laws of Parsis, making them on equitable and gender just. Prior to 1991, the shares of female heirs were half of the share of their male counterparts. That is, the daughter was entitled to half of son's shares, and mother was entitled to half of father's share. Sister was entitled to half of brother's shares, though all of them were entitled to inherit simultaneously as co-heirs. The 1991 amendment to the Indian Succession Act 1925 has removed this discrimination against women and made the share of daughter equal to that of a son and that of the mother to the father. Now, surviving spouse and children, both son and daughter, receive equal shares, and mother and father receive equal share, which is equal to the half of the share of each child. As per this law, not only the surviving spouse of the intestate is an heir, but also the spouse of predeceased son and predeceased daughter and other lineal descendants are also entitled to inherit. Friends, laws alone cannot make justice available to citizens in society. Seeking equality in an unequal society is a task demanded concerted efforts on the part of all of us, the community, the government, judiciary, as well as NGOs, etc., on a continuing basis. This is what women as class must realize in their struggle to equal justice. In the Democratic Republic of India, personal laws discriminating between men and women violates the fundamental rights and negates equality of status as spelled out in the preamble of the Constitution and is mandated by Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution. There is need for legislation in Muslim law to give equal share of property to the widow and daughter along with sons. As we have seen, during the discussion that daughters are entitled to inherit half of what the son will inherit. Legal recognition is required to be given to the economic value of the contribution made by the wife through household work for purposes for demanding ownership of matrimonial property instead of continuing the archaic test of actual financial contribution. On divorce or separation, the wife should be entitled for at least one third of the assets acquired at the time of and during the marriage. Thank you.